Hello, everybody. In this video, I want to talk about the topic of wealth inequality and luck or chance. It's actually a really interesting area of discussion and debate, and one that's been coming up increasingly. You have a lot of people who are out there, both on the left and the right, and I'm thinking now in particular. Recently, I watched one of Fringe Element's new videos where he talked a lot about kind of the luck of being a billionaire, and then you have people on the left like Ocasio-Cortez saying, you become a billionaire just by sitting on a couch. But even more than that, I just saw on Sam Harris's podcast, they did a discussion about this. Well, in part about this, it wasn't only about this topic, but the idea that, if you have wealth, it is by chance or by luck, and that therefore that wealth is either ill-gotten gains or at least not legitimately yours, and therefore belongs to the state and should be redistributed. And I think that there are, depending on the claim that's being made, and I don't want to compress all of them together, so Sam Harris wasn't necessarily making the same claims that Fringe Elements was, and vice versa. There's many ways that you can kind of parse out this topic, but I just want to go into like my thoughts on where this goes. So. Chance is kind of like an interesting thing. I think it's fine in parlance to believe in luck and chance and to say that there is such a thing. But when you start to really think about it, you get into problems with, is there just a general determinism, and by which case there aren't things that are lucky or unlucky. It's just that everything is predetermined. The Big Bang happened and everything else is just destiny from that point, in which case everyone and everything is the way it is meant to be, literally. Like the particles of the universe were set into motion, and everything is, every neuron in your brain, every chemical reaction, every photon of light, every fluctuation of a quark or whatever, was set into motion at the onset of the Big Bang, let's say. And so everything that happens. So this is a theory that really doesn't, that proves too much, right? So this is not something that you would then go, okay, well, so then billionaires have ill-gotten gains or are just lucky, and so therefore um, the state can do with it as well. Well, it means that everyone, I mean, a poor person, their gains are from that, right? If you have anything that you have or don't have, it's because of destiny. And there's another one of the big problems with this argument when it is used to invoke a redistributive tax is that there's just a huge logical leap from, well, you got lucky, therefore you are not entitled to your money, and the state can take it, and that's a good idea for a host of other reasons based on assumptions that don't necessarily stand up to scrutiny. It's getting a little bit ahead. So I think the idea of luck is interesting, and I'm willing to say, well, some people do. There's luck involved. There's certainly, to the extent that there are circumstances beyond your volitional control that can contribute to success. That's certainly true, but that's not the whole story either. You might argue that this or that entrepreneur invested, and their investment turned out very well, and so they're quote lucky. But then there are people who to go to use Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's claim, you can't just sit on your couch though, right? You can't just sit on your couch and you'll get lucky and become a billionaire, right? There are certain things that you need to do, and even if you do them, it's not a guarantee, but they're prerequisites for you to even get lucky. You can't just win the lottery. You have to buy a lottery ticket, unless you're going to say, what if you just find a lottery ticket or somebody just gives it to you? Well, the odds just went from very, very low to statistically close to zero. And even there, you have to accept the lottery ticket and go to the trouble of turning it in and calling and say, hey, I found it or whatever. So yes, you can't just do, it's not pure luck. There are certain activities that you have to do to even be in the game. So I'm going to use the example here that Fringe Elements used, because I think it's a good example to illustrate some of the points that are discussed in here. But he talked a lot about Amazon, and he was just saying that, look, there were other companies similar to Amazon, and he looked at a couple different variables, a few anyway, and said, I don't see why Amazon's so innovative. There are other um, companies out there that were kind of similar, and Amazon wasn't really special, and so but it won, and it's a monopoly or something close to a monopoly. He didn't get into the whole debate about monopolies or not, but and now Jeff Bezos is worth whatever $160 billion. So one of the problems with his analysis is that I think he just looked at like one or two variables and he's like, look, see, there's nothing innovative about Amazon. Amazon is indistinguishable from all these other things. And I think that would be kind of like looking at the United States and the USSR and saying, well, the United States won the Cold War. But that's just luck, because if you look at a picture of the Kremlin and you look at a picture of the United States Capitol building, they don't look all that different, and it's not a there's not a huge change. Well, there's a lot more to it than what it looks like in a picture, and there's a lot more to the differences between Amazon, or at least I'm not saying that but there very obviously could be more differences between Amazon and its competitors than a screenshot of their home pages, which is what Fridge said. He looked at a screenshot of the Amazon homepage back in whatever 98, and a screenshot of where their competitors. I don't really see a big difference. Well, if that was the extent of their business, having a homepage, then you might have a point. But obviously, there's all kinds of stuff going: the production, the management chain, their whatever customer service. So, I mean, I think that's a super, super simplistic way to say, well, you want to arrive. If you want to arrive at the conclusion that it's just luck, then you can just isolate one or two variables that are easy to look up and say, well, I don't see a big difference, and so therefore it must have just been luck. When actually, again, if you're comparing the United States and the USSR, there are thousands of variables, and it's not so simple as to just look at the Capitol buildings and a postcard and say, well, they don't look all that different. The Kremlin looks nicer for, it's got more colors in it for anyway. Well, there's more variables that go into how a business operates and how a business may or may not be successful relative to another business than their homepage. But even, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say that it really was just luck that Amazon and its competitors, there was no innovative difference. Um, there's no substantial way in which Amazon was a better company, and it just got lucky. Uh, Even then, there's still two problems, or at least two problems. One is, let's forget companies and let's just look at like actual dumb luck, like winning the lottery. If Amazon got lucky just because of market conditions beyond its control and not any of its own innovations or the hard work of Jeff Bezos or whatever else, well, then someone who bought a lottery ticket is even more lucky. So then when we just argue that, well, if you won a lottery ticket, then you don't own the winnings, and all that money should be forfeit, or as much of that money should be forfeit as we arbitrarily decide um, to redistribute to however we want to redistribute it. So you clearly don't deserve it, but the people who are no more or less lucky than you clearly do deserve it. So one of the problems there is, what's the incentive of even playing the lottery then? Now, I'm not a gambler. I have never bought a lottery ticket in my life. But like, lotteries are there for a reason. People raise money for them. Now, obviously, you can have private lotteries. You can have a private charity that runs a lottery. That's actually not that uncommon to have potlucks and that sort of thing. Usually, those are smaller scale, and you're not talking about people becoming millionaires or billionaires. Hypothetically, totally possible though. But even in our system today, lotteries are run by states. Very often, it's to pay for schools or pay for this or to pay for whatever socially beneficial thing that you believe. Uh, if we're going to say, well, the winners of lotteries are just lucky, and therefore um, their their uh, their wealth, such that it is ill-gotten or at least illegitimate and can be taxed completely away, then there's no reason for anybody to play a lottery, right? Why would you buy a lottery ticket? Why would you help the schools in your state by buying a lottery ticket if upon winning the state would just come and tax some significant or all? And again, the logic here is, all of your money from the lottery is ill-gotten. Right? All of it is based on luck, right? And it's a stretch to say this is true of a company, but for the sake of argument, let's just say it's all based on luck. Well, then why would they only take half of it? If you won $20 million, well, it wasn't only $10 million that you won in the lottery, you won $20 million. So they should take everything, right? Well, then there's no reason for anybody to play a lottery. And so whatever you're raising money for, whether it's for a cancer banquet or for a potluck for your Kiwanis Club, or whether it's for the public schools in your state, there's no reason for anyone to play a lottery then, because the incentive for winning is gone. Now, running a business is not pure chance. It's not, all right. You're working towards it. But if the result is, if you say, okay, yeah, go go run a business, work really hard, work long hours, try and be as innovative as possible, try and satisfy a market demand for a good or service, do whatever you can. But if you do win, quote unquote, if you get lucky and you become wealthy, well, then that wealth really doesn't belong to you. It's an ill-gotten gain, or if not an ill-gotten gain, it's not gotten by your virtues, and it's forfeit. It can be taken, and again, there's no way from this logic to decide, well, how much of your billions is from your hard work and how much of your billions is from getting lucky. And Fringe Elements talks about this in his video, where he talks about how, um, and also actually Sam Harris talked about it in his video as well, where you've got the CEO has all this money, but then middle management people or employees who are working similar, maybe similar number of hours, and as far as you can observe with the eye, similarly hard. They're not becoming millionaires or billionaires. They're just making six figures or five figures, or who knows. And so what's the assumption here? That the CEO then should have the same pay as who exactly? The average person in the firm, the lowest paid person in the firm, minimum wage for their hours. What exactly? Is every penny that they make, should they be made completely destitute because it's all luck? Or so there's no real. I don't know if there's even a way to establish how much of it is luck and how much of it is not luck. But I do know if you're going to have a tax system that's based on the assumption that being a millionaire or a billionaire or whatever it is, anything above the limit you place, then there's no incentive to even try. And so no one's going to buy a lottery ticket. Or in the case of a capitalist economy, no one's going to try and provide the good or service. What's the point? Maybe there were, maybe Amazon was lucky, but there were lots of companies. This is one of the points Ryan was making in his video. There were lots of companies that tried to do that. Well, they were all trying to do it so they could get rich, right? They weren't saying, okay, we're just trying to do this, but we only want to make the same salary as everybody else. We don't want to become wealthy. We just want to invest all of this time and effort and attempt to innovate, and we're only doing that so that we can, make as much money as we could make as a wage earner, right? So there's no return on capital, and there's no benefit for being an entrepreneur, because really entrepreneurs should only make what their labor. This is very labor theory of value-esque, that there's a subjective amount of value for what you do. Anything above that is exploitation, and looking at what a CEO or a capitalist or an entrepreneur does and just saying, well, anything above your labor is just luck. Well, so let's just assume that's, for the sake of argument, that's correct. And by the way, I think that is an assumption. The analysis that they're providing on that is pretty piss poor, in my opinion. Oh, the screenshot of the homepage doesn't look any different, and their programming, as far as I can tell, wasn't that different. Yeah, if that was all there was to a business, that would be a really simple business, but that's not it. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say that it is just dumb luck. Well, there's no point in even trying, though. You're not going to have any firms trying to fill the market share that Amazon did, because there's no gain. You're just going to make the same as if you were doing everything else. There's no point in innovating. If there's no winners, then no one's going to play. If you can't win at the casino's not going to be a thing. And I'm not a gambler, like I said, and so there are people say, well, it's bad to go to a casino. Yeah, but in the market, the way that you gamble, the way that you buy a ticket, right? You don't go to the liquor store and buy a ticket. The way that you buy a ticket in a market economy is, and the way that you gamble is by providing goods and services to people. So you're not just, quote, wasting money, you're actually doing something valuable. And if there is no benefit, if you're not going to win big by doing that, then there's no reason to do it. There's no more reason to do that than to do anything else that pays the same wage. But if any benefits above and beyond your wage labor, the market value of your office time or whatever, and there's no benefits, if all entrepreneurial gains and profits are luck that are subject to the whims of the state. And again, if they want to say, oh, well, we'll leave some incentives so you can be worth $10 million. Well, why that? Because fewer people are going to be incentivized to get $10 million than who knows however many billion. But then even then, it's like, well, why are we leaving it at 10 million? Because by the logic, even the 10 million is ill-gotten. All of that, I keep saying ill-gotten, earned by luck or not earned at all. A function of luck, right? So there's that problem. Right? Then the second problem is there's just this logical leap that you got lucky, therefore society deserves to be able to take it, and not just society, specifically the state. And that is a third problem here. Okay, yeah, you got lucky. Let's say I got lucky. I won the lottery, or I was walking down the street and I found a chunk of gold. I got lucky. So let's say that that happened. Why is it that that is I'm now obligated to surrender some portion of that or all of that to the government, right? There's just a huge logical leap there from you have it. The kind of the argument that you might offer here, that maybe someone like Obama would say, oh, you didn't build that. Well, if we're talking about me just picking up a gold nugget, yeah, no one else built that either, right? I mean, the state didn't create the gold nugget, society didn't create the gold nugget. It was created by geological processes and eroded by the weather, which is not, maybe we're going to give credit for DARPA in that case, but otherwise, no, it's not anyone else. No one else was involved but me. I'm the one who found it first. No one else had found it before me, or if they had, they decided they didn't want it. So in that case, in that type of situation, right, there's a huge kind of belief here that just everything is a debt to society, no matter what, and not just society, but the state in particular. This is, my anarchist intuition's kind of kicking in here, but like, why do I owe it to state? Why don't I owe it to, say, the Catholic Church or to the Boy Scouts or to St. Jude's or whoever else? Why is it that the state gets credit for everything? Why is it the recipient of all unclaimed obligations? Like there are these obligations that are out there. The other problem is that you kind of pay as you go, right? If I go and I pay my income taxes and I pay my property taxes and I pay my sales taxes and whenever all the goods, all the stuff in my room, all the books and the guns and all that stuff, that's all stuff that I pay for. Like I work for that money and then I use the money to buy those things. And so when I walk away from that exchange, there isn't a lingering debt left to be collected by somebody else, let alone by the government. I'm free and clear of those things. And so there's this weird aggregation, this buildup of a debt that is then claimed whenever you have something that they want, but it's very quite selective. So again, even if it is lucky, so what? Doesn't automatically follow that what you own, the fruit of your fortune belongs to somebody else, whoever that somebody is, let alone that somebody must be the state, right? And then kind of buried on top of all of that, I mean, that in and of itself is a really interesting debate. I think, though, that again, there's a lot of assumptions baked in that don't make a lot of sense, assuming that it's lucky when it's not necessarily the case. Or if you're going to say, well, ultimately everything is based on determinism. There used to be these YouTube, it was a small channel, so I don't want to credit them with their name, but like, they thought, well, they believed in hard determinism. All right, fair enough. That's a consistent, like, logical position to have, I guess. But then to say, therefore socialism. Well, no, therefore whatever is whatever is. It's like politically neutral to believe in determinism. Like you can say, well, we're still going to have laws based on free will, even though free will is not real. There's determinism, but whatever is whatever is. And so in my deterministic world, if you create a company and become a billionaire, then you get to keep all that fucking money. And that's just what happens. And so that's the deterministic thing. So there's that. Then there's the problem of if you do have it, why is that a claim on somebody else? If you've been lucky, again, if you win the lottery, does that mean you have to give up everything you won from the lottery? Why? And who gets it? Who claims it? And then the other problem is kind of this assumption that well, that inequality is a problem, and I think that this is debatable at the very least. First of all, if inequality is a problem, then we have way bigger issues than billionaires, okay? Because we have people who have different height, we have people who have different eye color, we have, as Sam Harris said, people with radically asymmetry in their face, right? People who are ugly. A person who's ugly deals with that their whole life, or has a big birthmark on their face, or a low IQ, or these are all things that it's very hard to point and say this is somebody's fault, and they suffer from this all the time. So what are we going to do? Does everyone have to be knocked down to the lowest common denominator? And if you say, no, no, that's crazy, that's too far, well, we've already conceded the point. If you're saying a billionaire is too much, or a multimillionaire is too much, or whatever it is that you say, someone else can just step right up and like, well, why are you stopping at 100? Why are you stopping at $1 billion? Because somebody who has $583 million, how many more times wealthy is he than me? So much so that from my perspective, from the perspective of somebody who's average, a 532 millionaire is the same as a 52 billionaire. There's no difference as far as I mean, I can look at the numbers different. I can see how many zeros there are. Doesn't mean anything to me. It's the same difference. So we could pare this all the way down to where we have equal income and then be like, well, it's still not fair because they're more attractive and they get all the attention, or they're better at parties, or whatever else. They had a nicer family. They went to a better school. And even if our schools had the same funding per student, you could say, well, their teachers were just better, or the playground was nicer, or there was a pretty stream next to their school, and it was really scenic, and that was way better than where I lived because it was just kind of a crappy parking lot or whatever else, right? So there's kind of no logical end to where this goes, and also it again isn't clear to me what exactly the huge problem is, because usually when they say, well, there's a problem with inequality, I think the main thing they cite is like, well, the problem is that the people with more wealth relative to other people will then have the ability to influence the government and then use that to their advantage. Well, I have news for you. That's already going on. That's always been going on. There isn't a single state in the history of the world where that hasn't been the case. The states that get the closest to abolishing that are extremely violent communist ones that go around killing millions of people. Okay, so if you're really serious about inequality, and this is what that great book, The Great Leveler, was all about. Couldn't remember the name, so I looked at my bookshelf, and there it is. The most effective way, and this does not even solve the problem completely, but the most effective way to lower inequality is democide. And the best things that haven't been communism, it's been plague. So if millions of people die, that tends to raise wages and destroy a lot of capital, and you get some leveling. Okay, in terms of political solutions, yeah, it's basically communism, but it has to be radical. It can't be, it can't be the welfare socialism of the Scandinavia. That doesn't do it. Okay, you still have inequality there. You have massive inequality there. You need class revolutionary violence and liquidation, and even then you don't get it all the way. You just get a little bit more, and it's only temporary, because eventually things settle down, and then you get a whole new system of inequality based on the party and the socialist state. So what are we like? What degree of inequality is okay? If inequality is really a problem, and then shouldn't we just go all the way and be complete egalitarianism? And if not, why? That's a rhetorical argument that you're always going to lose to the person who's more egalitarian than you are, right? You're not, if you say $1 billion is a cutoff and the next person says no, it should be 100 million, they're going to win. They have all the rhetoric. You've already conceded the point by saying it should be 1 billion, and then when they say 100 million and the next person comes and says 1 million or 500,000 or whatever, any 1 penny over the average or 1 penny over what anyone else has, there you go. And then we're going to have to start chopping off dicks, breaking legs, and gouging eyes to get things even more equal. So let's see. Something else I wanted to say. But so the idea that like redistributive taxes are going to do it is completely false. They don't. That does not eliminate inequality. And again, the big argument against inequality is that, well, they'll take over the state and then use the state to their advantage. Well, that's true. They will. And to me, that seems like a really good argument for curbing, limiting, or even eliminating the power of the state. The ability, it's very much like the metaphor of the Ring of Power in Lord of the Rings. And Tolkien says that there are no metaphors, they're just stories that he's going to tell. And fair enough, I'm going to then use it because it's a great metaphor. He also was a private property anarchist, believe it or not. There is these debates at the Council of Elrond what to do with the One Ring. And there was this problem that, well, give it to the elves. Well, the dwarves and the humans thought, well, that's not fair. They'll use it against us. And then give it to the dwarves. No, same problem. So what was the really only solution to this problem? Was to destroy the ring. Now, destroying the ring turned out to be very difficult and a very dangerous proposition and was fraught with its own perils, but it was the only real solution. Now, I'm not saying abolishing the state is necessarily easy or pretty or will solve all of our problems, right? The death of Sauron does not mean utopia, but it probably is the only real solution to this problem, because there is no such thing as the state that is immune to the influence of special interests. and there's no such thing as a state where there is no hierarchy, where there is no um, distribution of powers such that some people have more influence than others. I always say this about like Noam Chomsky. You know, one person equals one vote is bullshit, because you have someone like Noam Chomsky who has influence over other people. And all these free-minded democratic socialists are going to be like a bunch of lemmings when Jimmy Dore or Ralph Nader or Bernie Sanders tells them, or AOC tells them how they have to vote, then that's what they're going to do. And so it's just a scam and a lie to believe in that kind of egalitarianism. It doesn't exist. And what the state can do, just like Sauron's ring, is it can enhance that. All right, you can leverage your natural abilities, your natural hierarchy, your natural, oh, you have really good business acumen. Or if you're one of these people, oh, it's just luck. Okay, so how is so you just got lucky to be a millionaire. All right, that doesn't make you particularly dangerous. You just got lucky, right? Let's take them up at their logic and say Jeff Bezos is a billionaire only because he's lucky. Okay, then I'm not really too worried about Jeff Bezos because he's not an Ubermensch. He's just a guy who got lucky. So what's the big deal? He's going to get what the odds are, right? If it's just luck, it hits the other stupid thing about this argument. If it is just luck, then there's nothing we should do about it, because if it's random chance, then odds are they're going to lose just as much as they win, and it's all going to even out at the end, right? And I think a lot of these people kind of hesitate because they realize, well, it's not even odds, right? Because it's not dumb luck whether Jeff Bezos got rich or not, because he did things that didn't make it just by chance. It wasn't just luck. They did things to make it more likely to happen. Now, was there some element? Was there some role? Sure. But okay, the things that he was doing made it possible for him to get wealthy. And if you cancel it out, he would probably become wealthy again. Maybe he would only be worth $1 billion, maybe only 500 million, maybe it would take 20 years instead of 13 or whatever. But it kind of flies in the face of the argument, oh, God, there's nothing, it's just completely chance. No, it's not apparently completely chance. And if it is completely chance, then why are we trying to alleviate it? Or they just got lucky. And so they'll just get unlucky sometime, right? They can't just, is the argument that we need to intervene because there's some people who are just naturally more lucky and that they're always going to roll, I don't know, what's a good dice roll? I don't play dice. They're just going to roll. They're just going to get really lucky guesses every time. They're going to win the lottery over and over and over again. We shouldn't allow lotteries because some people might just win over and over and over and over again. Well, no, then you don't believe in dumb chance, and you don't believe that it's just luck. You're acknowledging that there's something more to it than that, and then it kind of destroys your whole argument as to why they're ill-gotten gains or they didn't earn them. Apparently, they've done something that makes them eligible. You can't just sit on a couch. You have to do something, and in a market economy, the thing you have to do is provide goods and services for people. And if circumstances beyond your control reward that with a couple $1 billion or even a lot of $1 billion, fine. There's other fears. I guess people say, well, you get lucky and then you become a monopoly. That hasn't happened. Amazon is not a monopoly. Google's not a monopoly. Facebook's not a monopoly. None of these are monopolies. And the definition of monopoly has changed over the years to like any big company, but no. Unless they're the sole provider, they're not a monopoly. And there's a huge difference between a sole provider and a single provider that's very large and lots of small ones, because the competition with a lots of small one keeps prices down, keeps innovation up, and as long as there's no barrier to entry, then there's some reason for them to be worried about people coming in. And the only thing that's going to stop people from entering, the only thing that's going to be a barrier to entry that actually stops people is the state itself, right? This big redistributive force that's supposed to balance the scales of the universe, right? The Big Bang made some people more lucky than others, and fucking Uncle Sam is gonna come and right that wrong and make it all equal, or make it at least more equal. Come on, that's fucking delusional. Um, and also, it's not just cynicism on my part, but there's a very good question of whether the programs, even funded by the billions of lucky billionaires, are going to actually, change inequality. Have we become a more equal society because of Social Security and the Great Society and welfare and Medicaid and Medicare? Like all these things, we have progressive taxation in the United States. We have all these wealth transfer programs for all kinds of different things, right? We're not in a free market economy, and yet everyone's complaining about how inequality is getting worse and blah blah blah. Well, we have a mixed economy, and there's just this kind of knee-jerk, well, it must be because of capitalism. Capitalism, maybe there's this kind of feedback loop, and free markets just make the rich get richer and richer, and the poor. Well, we don't have a free market. We have a state. that's I mean, it's a actively interventionist state. It's one of the most interventionist states ever. We can imagine worse states, like the communist states, and of course had they had far worse problems. I think is fair to say. But there needs to be some nuance here. If there is inequality today, and again, I question how much of that is a problem, but if there is, where is that coming from? It's not enough to say, well, he is the CEO of a company, and that's must be because capitalism. Not well, okay, but is the government doing anything to help them? Is it restricting competition? Is it forcing markets to go a certain way? Is it inflating the stock market by a tax policy, by financial policy? Is the monetary policy of the state doing anything to the stock market? Yeah, obviously it is. Obviously it is. And it's kind of one of the interesting thing in the Sam Harris interview. I forget who he was talking to. Let me check. Some of you might want to watch it since I referenced it repeatedly. So let me figure this out one quick. Oh no, that's not it. Sam Harris. Sorry guys, should have thought of this before. Okay, Scott Galloway. One of the things Scott Galloway said is like, we don't really have progressive taxation. We do to a point, and then we don't because tax lawyers are smarter than the IRS. Okay, yeah, he's right about that. There's a huge incentive difference. There's a huge incentive difference for people wanting the special interest to keep their money and avoid it getting out of taxes. But you know what else is true? Lobbyists are smarter than ever than regulators, right? The businesses that exist that operate in the market, they have more at stake than the bureaucrat who works for regulatory X, and so they have every reason to influence the regulations and to then avoid, curtail, and use it. It's regulatory capture 101. It's the story of the progressive era. The evidence for this is tremendous. Again, I recommend The Triumph of Conservatism and Restraint of Trade, two books from opposite political ideologies reaching the same conclusions. The idea that the regulatory states are operated by conscientious, beneficent bureaucrats who are bent on nothing but the betterment of the common people, that are incorruptible and have perfect knowledge, so they know what kind of regulations will work. It's all a myth. It's a fantasy. What really happens, there's every incentive for it to happen, and there's no system that you can construct that can avoid this, is to curtail the system in such a way as cater to the needs of those who can buy influence, whether they're buying the influence through direct bribery and graft or through more indirect ways. There's a thousand ways to slice it, and there's no way to stop it. And so just like we have a system where the rich can hide their money from the tax man, businesses can use regulations to do the same thing. And you have to wonder, they're doing that actively, right? These guys, with maybe the exception of the Koch brothers, big industry, big billionaires, corporations, they're not funding the Mises Institute. They're not funding radical anarchists. They're not even funding Reason and Cato to a large extent. They're funding the Democrats, and they're funding the Republicans and then Heritage and these middle of the road big government things. So the idea that like, well, secretly they would all do way better off under an actual free market and our anarcho-capitalism. Well, they're certainly not acting like it, right? They're not subsidizing anarcho-capitalism in any degree. Not secretly, not. I mean, there's what are there, like 400, 500 billionaires in this country? So you might find a couple, maybe Peter Thiel, again, maybe the Koch, single Koch at this point. And maybe there's one or two other ones. Okay, so if we can find four, that's 1% of the billionaires. What do the 99% of the other ones think? They're Michael Bloomberg's. Michael Bloomberg's not an anarcho-capitalist. Tom Steyer is not an anarcho-capitalist. George Soros, not an anarcho-capitalist, never will be. Totally anti-anarcho-capitalist in every possible way. And I'm going to say that the vast majority of billionaires, in fact, not just the majority, the 98, 99% of billionaires are going to fall into that category, not the Koch, Peter Thiel category. And that's even assuming that like they are anarcho-capitalists and whatnot. And maybe they are. Maybe for the sake of argument, I'll say that they are. Okay, fine. That's 4 out of 400. That's not even 1%. That's not even 4. That's half of 1%. So yeah, I mean, all the lobbyists, all the billions of dollars spent lobbying in for lobby organizations in the Beltway around DC, they're not there constantly liable. Let's have free markets. Let's have a complete free market. Let's abolish all regulations. Let's abolish all taxes. No, they might say change this regulation, abolish that tax, but the net effect is regulatory capture, an interventionist state. So no, even if you want to accept that luck is a thing, luck then should average out, should cancel itself. The fact, as soon as you realize that you need to try to actively suppress or distribute, you're acknowledging, at least implicitly, that luck is not the only thing that's involved. that there are other factors that are actually volitional and worthy of reward. You're completely taking away the incentive, right? Even if we accept that there is some luck, well, what's the point in playing the lottery if the winner gets all their money taxed away? What's the point in innovating and starting a business and competing on the market to provide goods and services, right? There are all these people worried about a monopoly and worried about, well, okay, what's the point of even going to the trouble, of going to the effort of taking the risk if the reward is that you get to be demonized and have all of your gains taken away, right? That doesn't make any sense. So, and the other thing that I haven't touched on, these are the supposed reasons for any, like, oh, the inequality, you'll be able to use the government. And of course, the obvious answer of then just diminishing or abolishing the government doesn't occur to most people or whatever. But the real reason I think is envy and jealousy. Okay. And then I'm poor relative to them. I don't like it. I want their money. It makes me upset. Finn Jellimans, to his great credit, and I mean that, admitted that he has his own very strong egalitarian biases, and I applaud him for saying so. Um, uh, and I think that they're probably getting the better of him in this case, if not others. And then the other thing is, yes, it's envy. Yes, it's jealousy, which is no way to win your life. So what if someone's a billionaire? Fuck it. Live your own life. Have a good time. If he's not using the state to, corner the market or whatever, or use regulatory capture, it's not really your problem. He's doing a service for you. If anything else, if he uses goods and services, and if he doesn't, it's nothing in your face. But the other thing is, like, this is just a pivot from socialists, right? Socialists, we're going to say they want socialism. All right, there's the conceit of they have a plan for the world and they want to see it implemented, and at first they thought it was just going to happen, and that never materialized. The only place it happened was where it wasn't supposed to happen. It didn't turn out so well, in Russia and China or anywhere else that they tried it, for that matter. And so then they said, oh, well, it's not inevitable, but it's morally superior because it's more fair. And then that kind of lost a lot of steam. And so then they said, well, people will be so poor. The lot of the workers will get worse and worse and worse under capitalism, and so they'll have to unite and become class conscious and overthrow. Well, that didn't happen. The well-being of the poor has been going up and up and up. This is whether we're talking about the United States or the world generally. And so, I think that there was an argument here when you're talking about absolute poverty. Maybe there's a role. Well, now they had to pivot again because the absolute poverty is no longer a thing. Like we have to redefine what is considered poverty. You can have a house, 2 flat screen TVs, a car, and be fat and be considered impoverished, way under the poverty line. Okay, that's not going to excise people as much as 19th century poverty, which meant starvation and dying of tuberculosis. So now, instead of just being absolute poverty, it's relative poverty. As long as some people are richer, that's a big problem. Margaret Thatcher said it very well. You don't mind that the rich are rich. You don't mind if the poor become poorer as long as the rich become less rich. Yeah, that's exactly goddamn right. That's what's going on here. And it's the same tool. All the other rhetorical arguments have been tried and have failed. So this is a pivot to this one, and say, look how rich he is. Aren't you jealous? That's ill-gotten. He didn't do anything, right? He just sat on a couch. And again, for all you AOC people out there, just fucking sit on a couch and see how long it takes for you to become a billionaire. Even longer than it takes than if you just buy a lottery ticket. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the topic, and I will talk to you all another day. Have a good one. Bye.